Good morning to everybody. I'm very glad you've come. This is the introductory session to a weekend of reflection and discussion about journalism. I think most, if not all of you, are journalists. And one of the many things the Ratu Foundation has done is to recognize that journalism in a democracy, in a free society, is one of the pillars of that free society, which is a large responsibility, which we'll be talking about later. I don't want to go on. You have seen the people who are here who, in one way or another, have been connected to the development of the Ratu Foundation Masterclass and others. So it's fitting I should pass the microphone to the host in the Ratu Foundation, the host of this masterclass, to Nikolai Ratu.
Good morning. Do I need the microphone, or is it working? Can you hear me at the back? Yes? No? Or should I speak into here? Is it better? Yes? Okay. In that case, I have to sit down. Good morning and welcome again to many of you, and welcome to to those who've not been with us before, either here or the masterclass, which is I think it's now 5th year. Is it, John? I think 5th year. Yeah. And you might ask yourselves why, with the Ratu family, Ratu tradition and so on, why journalism in particular? Well, just very briefly, some of you will have heard some of this story before. My father, Jon Ratu, first in 1957, started publishing a newsletter in Romanian in the UK, in London, and it was a bi-monthly, and it was put together on a group of people in London, plus as it developed, contributions from Romanians, nearly always other exiled Romanians, but some stories that were also smuggled out of Romania. And as a child, I remember going in on Saturday morning and doing the duplicating machine, which was because it was in 57 when it started. So I was, what was I? 11. And that carried on through until 1982. In 1982, the World Union of Free Romanians was formed, and which was got together all the different exile organizations around the world. There was about 20 of them in different countries, to try and unite the diaspora, the Romanian diaspora, in a battle to maintain Romania's as a democratic identity in the West, as in that such a hope did exist that one day things would change in Romania, so they were united, if you like, against dictatorship and against communism, and the newspaper then became Romano Liber, and with an English edition as well, the Free Romanian, which was then published monthly, and published actually through until 96. In 90, when Jon Ratu came back to Romania, we founded Cotidianul, and which after we had originally intended to publish editions prior to the election, the first election in 1990, in May 1990. But the Ion Iliescu invited the miners into Bucharest, and they were directed to the printing press to smash the equipment, not the actual printing press itself, which we'd imported into actually the basement of the National Theatre, because it was the only ministry in Romania that was actually headed not by one of the kind of, let's say, junior members of Ceausescu's regime, government, but was Andrei Pleșu, who's still with us today. He was the first Minister of Culture. And so immediately during communism and immediately after, obviously, decision-making had continued as it always had, as in the decision only went right up to the top. And so he allowed us to put the printing press into the basement of the National Theatre. But anyway, so the Miners came, smashed the electronic equipment, like the where you did the photographic imaging of for the plates going onto the rotative printing press. And so we couldn't. So we then were issued an order to vacate the premises from the National Theatre. And so actually we produced about three copies of the newspaper, but actually Romano Liber, that we printed in Bulgaria, in Sofia, and the third edition. This was we could only do like 100,000 copies, but the third edition, unfortunately, the truck that came across the border, because we'd kind of found arrangements whereby we could get it in as supposedly advertising materials or something. The truck, unfortunately, fell into the ditch, and the seal on the truck was broken. So when it came to the border, they opened it up and found the last edition. So that was the last edition for another year until so that anyway. That's the brief history, not that brief, history of our the family's journalism. When we finished our association with Quotidianul, we looked to ways to how to somehow support journalism, independent journalism, ongoing. Which is where we started, first of all, with the Journalism Prize, which we now have had, I believe it's 8 editions. I might be wrong, maybe more, of the Independent Journalism Prize. And what the whole purpose of that was to encourage independent investigative journalists to give them a kind of support structure which would grow, if you like, from the club of winners, many of whom are friends with each other anyway. But and it's very interesting that the investigative journalist world does not appear to be particularly sort of intercompetitive. They actually support each other because they're all on the same side of the barricade, if you like. This then went further because the many, if not all, of the journalists who won the award, they joined our mentorship program for journalism, which is where the experienced journalists mentor younger journalists on a sort of one-to-one basis, and which has been going on now for 5 years. And we're enormously grateful to all those who act as mentors, many of whom are here today, as are some of our mentees. So over these next days, you'll be able to talk to them and meet them, because some of them will be appearing on panels, and certainly you'll hear from them. The purpose of these days is to encourage you all to participate as much as you wish. Obviously, we'll have question times after panels, but this is for an open discussion, and it's this. Perhaps this, you can call this one as our mentorship for the older generation of journalists. But and we have an extraordinary array of seasoned journalists with international reputations here, and you'll discover who they are over the days, because you'll meet them and hear them talking, and you'll find out about them. And that's what we like to generate here, and what John, of many years, very grateful to him, who with his experience he's one of the founders of the Reuters School of Journalism, so he's and a big name in foreign correspondence, and his years at the Financial Times. And so I want to welcome all of you, and welcome all the panelists who we will be hearing from, and particularly Dr. Rebecca Shah, who's here from the British Embassy's number 2 at the embassy, and to say a few words of what she thinks about this whole subject, journalism.
Please.
Thank you, Nikolai, and morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us all here. I'm here because the British Embassy, I'm the Deputy Ambassador at the British Embassy. I'm here because it is our privilege this year to sponsor the masterclass. It's the first time that I've been present to a masterclass. It's not the first time I've been here and enjoyed the incredible hospitality and seen the incredible things that the Ratziu Foundation does. And it's lovely to have this warm, safe, inclusive space where we can do this and we can have these conversations, because I don't know if you noticed that the world outside is a little bit scary right now. I mean, those of you who watched the film last night would have heard Donald Trump even saying he's inheriting a world on fire. I'm not sure that he's helping to put that out, but I think it sets the context. We are in a period of history that is perhaps, I don't want to use the word unprecedented, because I think the number of times unprecedented is used is now unprecedented. We say that for everything, but we are in a time that is perhaps more turbulent, more unpredictable, more unstable than in any other period of our modern history. We see wars, actual, proxy, hybrid, economic, informational, being used as tools of power, tools of international relations around the world, including in our own region. In that context, we see the link between truth and reality becoming ever more distant. It feels like the two are no longer so closely aligned as they were, and they should be. And we see that it is harder and harder in this space to do good quality journalism. We know that just financially, in order to sort of stay alive, it became increasingly difficult to navigate this space of information democratization or digitization when we moved into a digital age, especially for sort of independent investigative journalism. And then we see that compounded in the modern context by the way that funding shifts are happening. So, for example, seeing the withdrawal of funding for Radio Free Europe here. Kind of feels like a lot, right? It can feel a little bit overwhelming. It can be very tempting to go back and snuggle under our lovely warm duvets that we've got here in the fabulous hospitality. But my point in saying this is not to scare you back to your beds. My point in saying this, I hope, is to inspire you as to the importance of the work that you are doing and you will go on to do in the world. I'm going to give you a quote. It's not a new one. It's a quote from 75 odd years ago. A free press is the unsleeping guardian of every other right that free men prize. It is the most dangerous foe of tyranny. When men and women, that's my parentheses, have the habit of liberty, the press will continue to be the vigilant guardian of the rights of the ordinary citizen. That is a quote from Winston Churchill from 1949. Winston Churchill, who was the famous wartime prime minister in the UK. And I am giving you that quote not because he was also a journalist. He sort of rose to prominence as a war correspondent. And I know that that's a subject you're going to be talking about this weekend. But because he encompasses in that statement the understanding that a free press safeguards all the other freedoms that we enjoy as a democracy. It is the cornerstone of democracy, the lifeblood of informed societies, and the foundation on which we build our understanding of the world. So in this really quite scary, difficult context I have described, it is more important than ever to galvanize, support, encourage a flourishing media. I don't want to kind of over-egg the custard here, but democracy is at stake. We need you. The British government has long been a champion of media freedom. I've got my, this is my favourite water bottle. It's my Defend Media Freedom water bottle, which came from the conference that the UK held for global partners, I think in around 2018, beg your pardon. But I carry it with me because of what it represents and how important it is. And I say this, you know, as I work for a government that knows a free press can be uncomfortable. It can be awkward. It can ask difficult questions of them, but that is essential for holding power to account. So I want you, if you can, to take this weekend as something like a cross between summer camp and Ninja Warrior Training School. So like on the one hand, embrace the fact that things happen at camp that don't happen in your day-to-day lives. You have conversations you won't have. Take advantage of the fact that you are eating your meals together. You are having a drink together. Build those relationships and that understanding that will help you carry you through your future careers, whatever it is you go on to do. And you will always remember what happened at camp. And on the other hand, treat it as an opportunity to do your Ninja Warrior training, because there are some fabulous people speaking to you this weekend with incredible experiences and incredible expertise. So take advantage of that to sharpen your skills and your resolve. Take the advantage of that and ask them the awkward and difficult questions too, because that is what we all need to do to thrive and survive in this context. So it's our pleasure as the British Embassy to be able to support this event. Please do enjoy it and get the most you can out of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. It's great to feel needed. Ninja warriors, I'm not so sure, but we'll see as the weekend goes on. Finally, from the LSE, Emilia Knight.
Thanks, John. Good morning. Hello? Yes. I'm delighted to be back in Turda and seeing Nikolai, Pamela, the rest of the team, and many, many familiar faces. Our partnership was established in May 2019, and it features annual journalism and history workshops, as well as a democracy dialogues event. Ratio Forum has become a key platform for academic research, civic engagement, and policy discussion regarding democracy and governance in Eastern Europe. Ratio and ideas have made a significant impact on global discussion around two key areas. One, strengthening democratic dialogue in Central and Southeast Europe, and two, promoting media freedom and investigative journalism. Additional areas in the future are discussions on cybersecurity and technological innovation, as well as, given the Russia-Ukraine war, assessing new strategies for peace building. I believe that collaboration between academia, media, and policymakers is leading to innovative solutions to some of the most pressing global problems. What we learn and discuss here goes beyond Romania. It speaks to the universal challenges and responsibilities of journalism in a rapidly changing world. On a personal basis, I look forward to tomorrow's session on misinformation and fake news. I was a victim of misinformation. I was born and went to school in communist Bulgaria. And as one example, I was taught that the UK and Germany were on the same side in World War II. We at LSE Ideas are hugely impressed by the work, dedication, and impact that Ratio Forum is having on Romania and the region. It is an honor to be in this partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. It's right that the link with the LSE for the Ratu Foundation in all its works, this one and others, is very important, and it's very good that Emilia is here to stress that cooperation, which, when alas no longer here, Christopher Coker was the leader of the LSE delegation. He, more than anyone else, created a space, a context for discussion, especially on history, but more widely. We very much miss him in this and in other Ratu Foundation events. We're going to change now. If I could ask the distinguished panel to give way to another distinguished panel. Thanks a lot. That's great. You may have seen, if you read the agenda for the masterclass, that there are a number of people named to talk on the various subjects, some of them more than once. That isn't to stop anyone else speaking, or indeed them speaking many times. It was an indication that some of the people here are particularly interested in and expert in the issues we're discussing. So I'll ask them to come up one by one and make their contribution. 10 minutes or so, I think, should be enough, because as Nikolai stressed, and I would stress again, this is for discussion. There's a well-known saying in journalism that the only bad question is the one not asked. A video is going to be first. Well, because you came up first, so. Video Vangele has been here since the beginning. He's one of the country's foremost investigative reporters, and since he got to the forum first, he speaks first. A video.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Ovidiu Vanghele. I'm a journalist in Romania. I've been doing this job for 23 years now, and I was asked by the kind people here to speak a little about the, the state of the Romanian media, under these tough several years and especially difficult and struggling several months. I was trying to talk to Mr. Lloyd a little bit earlier about some key aspects that I would like to raise here, and the main issue I see in the functioning of the Romanian media now is still that huge, subsidy coming from the public budgets to the political parties, and then are being, funneled into Romanian media outlets. This creates something, to my knowledge, something really unique in, at least in the democratic world as we know it. This money basically changed the paradigm, shifted the paradigm, the normal paradigm of functionality of the media as it should be, as it used to be. Basically, people in the mainstream media especially don't really care about the number of the people consuming their product. They don't care about the feelings that people have when consuming their media. It doesn't matter anymore because money is still coming in on this alternative channel. So if you see, for instance, if you look at the Romanian landscape, you will see like 8 or even 9. I think Mircea might help me with this. I think there are 9 news TV stations in Romania right now. It's something unique, of course, and it's absolutely unbelievable that they can still exist, because it's a really important, I don't know how to call it. It costs a lot to have a TV station and to operate a TV station, because you need a lot of people, you need a lot of, everything costs. And where does that money come from? Well, it comes from this part of the public money that's being sent to the political parties and then to the media by them. So take a minute and think about this, and I don't know, maybe we should do something. I don't know what, but something should be done, because otherwise we'll keep going into this totally wrong, totally alternative direction, and we won't understand anymore what's the idea about this bloody journalism, media, whatever. So yeah, this is my first thing to say about this now.
Abilia, thank you. Just to underscore what he said, there was some years ago now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the French NGO Reporters Without Borders wrote about Romania's media, just actually before Romania took the presidency of the European Union in 2019. They wrote that Romania's media suffered from extensive politicization, corrupt funding, which Vilia's mentioned, decisions which are taken in the interest of the owners, the media owners, and not in the interest of the public or in the interest of journalism, and deliberate disinformation, something which we're going to be discussing tomorrow. So it's real. It's probably changed a bit since 5 years ago since that was written, but it's still real. It's real in this country, it's real in many countries, and it tends to corrupt journalism. But he was saying it's changed for the worse. You will know better than I do if that's true. If you, when we're opening it to discussion, want to pick up that thread, which is a very important one in every society, then please do. Next, Alison Mutler. Alison has been here for many years. She's dug into Romanian society and politics and journalism like no other foreigner that I know of. And she's next.
I was speaking on disinformation, but that's tomorrow.
You're free to speak about what you wish.
Yeah, disinformation is a very important topic in the media, both because the media has to recognize it and weed it out, and also provide factual reports. And we've had a lot of disinformation recently with the elections in Romania, which was improbably won by a candidate many people had never heard of, this conspiracy theorist outsider. And then came the news that a foreign state, later revealed to be Russia, the next day revealed by Antony Blinken, who was then the US State Secretary, had interfered in the elections, which most people, including the media, unfortunately, were astounded by, shocked by, did not believe it. So that created a problem for the audience, their audience, because you had these journalists who had no idea that Romania could actually be a target of disinformation, had to suddenly explain this to their readers, and they were grabbing at straws. Often, they find bits of information, maybe the Liberals did it, maybe this happened, etc., which is not helped by, there wasn't a lot of communication at an institutional level. So, in fact, it's been a steep learning curve for journalists, in fact, on what did go on. Then you have the moral questions whether it was correct for the elections to be cancelled, and was it, morally right? But first of all, we have to establish the facts. As I was talking to my colleague and friend Mark Champion, the facts are the important thing, what actually happened. And they have been coming out in dribs and drabs, but they have been coming out. And there is actually a picture if you want to look for it. Of course, some people don't want to look to it because they are either useful idiots or part of a sort of conspiracy, a disinformation campaign. So I think journalists have actually themselves had to wake up to the fact that Romania is it's not just, this nice country with the Carpathian Mountains and the Black Sea, but it actually has been a target for a country like Russia for many, many years, and Russia works in the long term. They don't think in short terms, they think in decades, we have found. So, for example, G4 Media, there's nobody here from G4 Media, but they actually produced because there's so much confusion. I've been contacted from journalists from outside, what's happening, can you explain it, etc., etc. And G4 Media has produced a 1-hour documentary on what happened, because there's so many bits and pieces and nobody gets the whole picture. And obviously this is drowned out by people like J.D. Vance, criticizing on the world stage, Romania cancelling elections, Elon Musk weighing in there, and, an army of bots and people who are part of this campaign saying it was unfair to cancel elections. So I think it's important. We're still in a storm. We're in political turmoil here in Romania. And that will be somewhat clarified on May the 18th, when we know who won the elections. But I think there's a lot of things that are still unclear, and the press has a very important role to play, and the press themselves have to know what's going on. And I think that a lot of them haven't. There have been investigations here and there, and people have got bits of the story, but not really presented the whole picture. And I still think there is among the public an idea that how could Russia interfere in our elections? But that is a certain naivety, and the job of the press is also to educate the public. So that's just a couple of thoughts.
Thank you very much, Alison. You mentioned Mark Champion, who's sitting in the front row. I hope he comes in, because he's been reporting from this part of the world for a long time and still does for Bloomberg. John, can you come in next? We saw, this is John Florescu, we saw last night a short and sharp film that he's made about Donald Trump, which, unlike much about Donald Trump, was, I thought, extremely neutral. while telling you a great deal about him, didn't take a kind of ideologically against or ideologically pro him, but gave you some sense of what the man is like from the testimony both of himself and of others. John, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you once again to Nicholas for bringing us all together here. In the course of my life, I've done a lot of things from print journalism, where I began as a freelance journalist in Paris, and then later I worked for the Associated Press in Paris, and the Boston Globe in Boston, where I'm from, and then into television. So I've covered different aspects. And I was thinking this morning, what an amazing difference, how this whole industry's changed so much. In New York, there are very few newspapers left. In LA, in Los Angeles, where I was a couple of days ago, there's only one newspaper left. I think except for London and Paris, which has a fairly rich newspaper culture, the newspapers are disappearing. The newspapers are disappearing because the advertising is disappearing, because the technology is changing. I remember we had an interview some years ago with Ted Turner about CNN that was coming on, this amazing channel, CNN down in Atlanta. And I think we've entered clearly this post-CNN moment. CNN is 1/3 the size of Fox. Fox has been owned by Rupert Murdoch and is a highly ideological institution. The habits of people in how they ingest news is changing radically. I mean, people get their news from podcasts. President Trump benefited enormously by going to an audience on podcasts that nobody even began to realize how large it was, far exceeding network news. Network news used to be the big thing to get on. Network news in the United States is getting tiny audiences of 5-10%, when they used to get 25%. So there's been shifts in habits, there've been shifts in financing, there's been shifts in technology, and that has happened at a fantastic rate. And I think that now the politicians understand how it's shifted. I think in the case of Kamala Harris, she had no idea of how the new social media and how the new podcasts were influencing people in different categories, whether they be Latinos, Black Americans, young white voters in the United States. And all of a sudden, surprise, Trump was winning in all these categories. So there's such a dramatic shift occurring right now at a time when, at the same time, the world is changing at a mystifying rate. Every morning, everybody gets on their CNBC to find out if their stocks have disappeared at early morning, and to see what the world looks like. It's happening so quickly, people can't even take full cognizance of what's happening. And that's what's going on in the United States, and because of Trump being so influential in the world, it's shaking up the whole world. And it's hard even, I did this show on on the election day for television in Europe, where I got together the people who were close to Donald Trump, at least a few of them. Most notably was John Bolton, Ambassador Bolton. And he had Secret Service protection even during our interview because he was under menace from the Iranian government. And Richard Haas, who was head of the Council on Foreign Relations, and people who were in the know. And you were learning remarkable things. What I just remember Bolton was talking about the president having no idea of history. He doesn't think about history. He doesn't know about history. He asked him not the other day, but when he was there, whether Norway was in Europe or not, wasn't quite sure. And he said when we were flying on Air Force One to meet with in Munich with Putin, Bolton wanted to explain some particular issues relating to nuclear force strikes or comparative between the West and Russia. And he said he wanted to watch FIFA football instead. So you're dealing with the world, journalistically speaking, that is nothing like it was before. People used to turn on the TV set and get a sense that there was balance at ABC, NBC, CBS, BBC, and across the world and so forth. There's a balance on the news. I think that's more or less gone. People in the United States silo listen. They go to silos they know. If you like Donald Trump, you go watch Fox. If you don't like Donald Trump, you watch MSNBC or something like that. So against this political situation, you have a media situation that is so evolved so dramatically that it's hard to know where to go and who to believe. People go to sources of news that they tend to agree with, they tend to like. And that, unfortunately, is the situation I find today. Thank you.
John, many thanks. There are two other people to speak, both called Mircea. First of all, Mircea Toma, who's head of the Audiovisual Council. Mircea, can you come in?
So the National Audiovisual Council is very vigilant when mistakes are happening. So I'm not leading this institution. I'm just a member.
Right. I realized the mistake, but didn't cancel it.
Yeah. So I'm vigilant, you see.
I'm careless.
Well, I will say a few words about the Georgescu's wake-up call the National Audiovisual Council received at the end of the last year. We, as probably the majority of the Romanian people here in this room, went to bed in a way, let's say, we felt secure about the results, but what happened overnight for me meant to make repeatedly refresh the data from the Electoral Bureau to see how crazy the numbers were going. The next day, we met in the office and we started to debate about what was happening and how responsible the media was and how responsible we were in relation to the phenomenon, which looked very absurd. Our luck was that Romania has very active NGOs, and we discovered what Expert Forum, it's a local NGO, published in the second part of the Monday, a statistic about the huge number of false accounts erupting in the last 2 weeks of the electoral period. And then we read again the DSA. The DSA is our new Bible. It's the Digital Service Act. It's the new main rules book guiding us, and we discovered there that there is an explicit reference to systemic risk. What was happening had put Romania in a systemic risk, we considered. So Tuesday we sent a letter to the Commission, EU Commission, to alert the Commission, and they reacted promptly. And Wednesday, they organized a meeting with TikTok representatives and 4 or 5 Romanian institutions representatives, including our institution. So I think the Council was the first Romanian institution to react. It was very good we did it. It was very bad. We only discovered the phenomenon after it happened. Like these institutions, I suppose other responsible institutions reacted very late and inefficient. This is not official what I'm saying here. I hope we are off the record, yes? Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
You're off the record, Mircea.
No, it was a joke. No. It was supposed to produce some smiles, at least.
So you're now on the record.
Yes.
All right.
But I could stop now, but in principle, I have some things to say, some stories to describe a little bit how the institution works and how it should work. but afterwards I would be happy to let journalists ask their questions and answer what is really interesting for them, not present some things which maybe you know already and so on. So please
I agree.
harass me.
That's very important that we know what people want to know. Certainly, the British equivalent of your council, Ofcom, most people don't know what it does.
It takes complaints.
It takes complaints, and occasionally refers to them. Hey, Mircea Barbu, can you come up to take my chair? And
We're going to sit down.
I'm just going to go there, but he's bringing his own chairs. Mircea is more often to be found on the border between Ukraine and Russia. He's a war correspondent, but he's more than that, and he will explain. Well, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening so patiently to all the speakers before me. I was actually listening and thinking of my own experiences. Just briefly, a couple things I would like to touch on in regards to the main topic of this morning discussion. As a journalist who covers conflicts, I find myself often in a situation where I have to report on both sides or one side, depending where I am. If it's Ukraine, it's most of the times, if not all the times, on the Ukrainian side. And that sort of embedded journalism, as we call it in the profession, comes with some ethical difficulties when it comes to this reporting. I remember doing a story with Nick Thorpe, who's here in the audience, when was it, 2 years ago, about draft dodgers, I think. I think it was the first time, if not among the first times, when journalists, at least journalists outside Ukraine, were touching on a subject that was quite sensitive at the time, and it still is. And I remember having that conversation. Is this the right time to report on problems that Ukraine is facing with recruiting soldiers, with men fleeing the war zone, fleeing the front line, with people who refuse to go to the army? And it's still a very, very sensitive topic. And we did the story. Nick did a brilliant radio documentary on it, and you can find it online. I think it's called Men Who Fled the Front Line, something like that. Yeah, I'll put a link up on a group, or you can approach me and I'll give you the link. But what I want to say is that as a journalist, often not just on the front line, in the field, when you try to hold power accountable, as we try to do all the time, you find yourself navigating this murky, difficult ethical dilemmas when you get too close to the power. So that's one aspect that I face. I would like to discuss. I would like to know your experiences with your own local power, whether it's a city hall, or whether it's national media, or any other experiences, and share mine as well. And second, holding that power accountable in this day and age has become increasingly difficult because power no longer cares about media. It's the example of the White House, who chooses now who to respond to based on their pronouns, or if they lift your accreditation or not, or if they give you one, as was the case with the AP correspondent. Was it AP? AP, I think it was. But we as Romanian journalists, and many of you who work in journalism, especially local journalism, know that this has been, at least in Romania, an ongoing issue. You send a freedom of information request based on the 544 law, the infamous 544 law, and many institutions don't reply, just simply don't answer to you, because they know that there's not much you can do. So sure, you can sue them if you want, but none of us have the time or the resources to do that on a regular basis. So there's no accountability. And that accountability has become a worldwide problem, even with states, democracies that responded to media inquiries or were able to be held accountable in some way by journalism. And this to me is one of the most difficult personal questions or personal dilemmas. I'm covering the Andrew Tate case in Romania for the BBC, and I find myself often sending emails to DCOT, to Attorney General Office, to all kinds of institutions. They simply don't reply because they know there's not much I can do about it. So yeah, let's talk about this. If you think it's interesting or relevant to you, I'm more than happy to share some of my personal examples, but I'm also very curious to hear yours.
Many thanks, Chair. There's a lot that you've said that people will come back on. The Tate brothers, obviously, they're waiting for trial here. They're also wanted for trial in the UK. Doubtful if they'll go back to the UK to face trial, but they may face it here. And there are differing opinions as to whether or not they will actually manage to get off, though the evidence against them seems very strong. The other thing that I wanted to flag up, and people have mentioned here but not gone into, is the case of Georgescu. You will know, I think, that in the American vice president made a speech in Munich some weeks ago, in which he mentioned Georgescu and the fact that he was disqualified, even though he won the presidential vote, the first vote, he was disqualified from taking the post. And J.D. Vance saw that as an insult to the freedom of speech. It would be good to hear from you what you thought about that, whether or not you thought that he was, in fact, as Marcel Toma has said, a danger to the constitution and to the state of Romania, or if it was a breach of freedom of speech by people who simply didn't like him for his politics. And that debate between these two poles of opinion is one which you can see in many cases, many places across the world, but here in Romania, it's become particularly sharp, and one that's involved journalism both in reporting, people like Mircea here doing, but also in making up your minds about what is the ethical morality of moving against someone who has won the popular vote. Also happens to be a large debate within the United States, but also elsewhere. So the floor is open to everyone. Please come in when you can. Maybe Nick Thorpe would like to come in.
Thank you, John, and it's very nice to be here. And back here. Thanks. Yeah. I don't have anything very wise or conclusive to say, but I'd just throw a couple of remarks into the pot to help, get this discussion going. I suppose what we're just talking about now, the impact. What's so hard in this storm that Alison spoke about, I think, is to know the impact. To quote another part of J.D. Vance's speech, he's suggested not only that it was wicked of the Romanians to cancel the first round result, but also that, he suggested how weak Romanian democracy might be if a few 100,000 votes might have been influenced. So how can one, and I don't have an answer to this, how can we measure the impact of Russian interference or the different TikTok accounts there? And it's very, very hard. Bringing, why did the US administration pressurize the Romanian government to release the Tate brothers? Perhaps because the Tate brothers had had an effect on the US election there. But how much impact did they have there? That's just, this issue of the impact is very, very difficult for us to measure, but it's something obviously we need to talk about. Rebecca was saying in her contribution there about the that it's harder to be a journalist nowadays. On one level, I think it is. One of my sons has just become a journalist. He's struggling to be a freelance. He's struggling to do in Istanbul in 2025 what I did in Budapest in 1986, which is to set up and start trying to maintain the habit of liberty, to spread the habit of liberty in the Churchill quote. But I'm not sure it is harder to be a journalist. I think I disagree, insofar as what this profession's actually about is curiosity and holding power to account. And I think I disagree with you, Mircea, slightly there, that I think power does still care about being held to account. It may pretend not to, but all we're doing is to, I think there's something, I regard myself as an old-fashioned journalist, and we're still doing today, and the young, amazing mentees that we have here that are being encouraged in this forum, I find that same curiosity and willingness to hold power to account. But what has become difficult is that there's so much stuff flying around in this storm. And coming back to the story we did relatively soon after the full-scale invasion, we were worried, are we, by reporting on Ukrainian deserters and draft dodgers, are we fueling Putin's agenda? Will it be picked up by Russia Today and spread that story? I don't think it particularly was, and lots of other Western media did the same story after us. But it's very important that we did do that story, that we did spend a lot of time on the Romanian-Ukrainian border finding people who were refusing, for all the different reasons that young men refuse to fight. So I think the same, somehow, if I do have a conclusion, I'm sorry, I'm just picking up on different things here. If I do have a conclusion, actually, one thing we can do as reporters is to carry on working in exactly the same way as we've always done, but also to question our own prejudices all the time and the conclusions that we had yesterday. We do need to carry on questioning ourselves and wondering if we've got it right.
Thanks, Nick. I think questioning prejudices is one of the most difficult parts of our, partly because the prejudices themselves are very often unconscious rather than something that you actually know you have. John, do you want to come in?
Yeah, listening to you talk, I remember early on I was part of a U.S. delegation when there's the first free elections in Romania in 1990, I think it was, and it's called NDI, National Democratic Institute. And we were sent to Romania, to small villages in Romania, to see if democracy was working, if voting was fair. And so we were traipsing around southern Romania and going into villages, and everybody was in a nice order, and everybody seemed to be voting, and it seemed okay. But as a way of judging an election, I thought it was a bit loose, to put it mildly. When the question about Georgescu came up, I felt that, of course, it was a shock to everybody, but I felt that if they were going to cancel the election, they had to be an arrest. They had to have people in handcuffs to say, okay, this is a big deal. You're stopping an election in Western Europe, part of the EU, but there's nothing definitive in terms of a clear arrest of X, Y, and Z is going to jail. He's being charged with this. And I have tried to understand the case against Georgescu very carefully, reading a lot of other things, and I still find it, I believe it's basically true, but I haven't found the smoking gun per se. They say, okay, where did the money come from? Well, obviously he was, financed by somebody. Elections cost. Running algorithms on TikTok require expertise. There's all kinds of facts that are very fishy. It's consistent with what we've seen Russia do in France with Marie Le Pen. They were giving loans and so forth in banks in France. So I think that was a mistake. And I think the state should have been immediately making its case much more clearly. I saw Tucker Carlson's interview just yesterday, and Tucker Carlson is an American conservative journalist who's sort of playing along with all the premises of Georgescu. But I find that what he's saying sounded like rubbish. He was quoting Kennedy, he was quoting Roosevelt, he was quoting Churchill. This is Georgescu. And if you look back, and his basic argument was the United States is postured to use Romania with a 380-mile common border with Ukraine to make an offensive attack on Russia. Well, I don't know anybody in Washington, whether the people I've met with, the people I read about, who actually takes that premise seriously. Nobody, neither on the left or on the right. So it's nonsense. And I think there's a big issue. I think news in the United States has become almost like an entertainment form. We talk about values, we talk about this, but to a large extent, if you go to Fox News that has a huge audience and so forth, the anchors are not deeply steeped in history. People's lack of knowledge and general education has gone way down. I spoke to Richard Haas, who said only 1% of the American public know about Article 5. And Article 5 says that, an attack on one is an attack on all. So if the United States all of a sudden deployed forces to defend Estonia or an island of Sweden, people say, well, what's all that about? And they can't even locate Ukraine on a map. So you have a sweeping ignorance across the United States, and you have a media that's becoming almost like an entertainment vehicle. Just look at the anchors on the air. Much different from what we saw a while back. And the case against Georgescu, I think, should have been put much more clearly, much sooner. And they were sitting on their hands. You said we were shocked. Why didn't we see this sooner? Well, that's why we've got the problem that we somewhat created.
The chair, you want to come back in and then a video?
Okay. I think that this is the main international topic when people are observing Romania and debating about the break in the democracy system when you block an electoral process without clear arguments, without clear proofs. I would say that we only had the smoke without the gun. But looking at what happened, putting such a cruel conclusion means that you ignore the context. I would like to know how many people are familiar with the term astroturfing. Could you raise the hand? Higher, please. Astroturfing. 8, 9. Bravo. If I would have asked the same question, the SRI, the Intelligence Romanian Service, External Intelligence Romanian Service, and other interesting, and National Audiovisual Council, nobody would have raised the hand. Probably some technician somewhere in a hidden office. But this means that technology went far away as compared to the competencies of the institutions. And I'll speak about the institution where I'm working now. The last financement came from FARE funds. You are too young to know what this means. It was the funds helping Romania to enter EU. So it happened before 2006. Exactly. Some computers in our institution still use Fox Pro. Fox Pro. Is anybody here familiar with Fox Pro? It's ancient. So we could run for a competition for museums of media as institution. We deal with radio and TVs. This is our main topic of activity. Recently, last year, I may say, we received the competence to address also the non-linear media, meaning what we usually call digital or big platforms, distributed media. So we were absolutely in no position to identify the irregularities happening during the elections using territories which were obviously not accessible to our competencies. It happened for the rest of the institutions the same. But I'm a psychologist as background, and I'm familiar a little bit with statistics. For psychologists, statistics is a proof. You measure the frequency and you see that in this case, in 2 weeks, a person jumps from 1.6% intention to vote to 23% votes. This is not regular. This means something bad happened inside the belly of the system. What exactly happened there? We start to understand. I would recommend an integration of the data made by Viginium. It's a department of the Prime Minister in France. They integrated data coming from Romania, from different entities, mostly NGOs. Mostly NGOs, yes. Less the desecretized information coming from the intelligence services. So the decisions to be made is that you see that something irregular happened, inauthentic, to quote the term which is present in DSA. It was inauthentic. Now we start to understand that what happened was a mixture of techniques combining real humans with bots trying to go under the radar of TikTok to manage to provoke TikTok to push naturally the visibility, to raise naturally the visibility of Georgescu. Georgescu reached the 9th position in the world trending top. So he was the 9th topic during these weeks, worldwide. Now, this is clearly artificial. You can't prove that it was artificial, but you can't ignore this. And you can't say that this is the will of the people. It is a fake will of the people. The decision was correct. It was not based properly on enough traditional arguments like having the gun next to the smoke.
It seemed to me you were making quite a savage attack on your own council. It seemed to me, hang on a second in the video, but it seemed to me you were making quite a savage account on your own council, but you were suggesting it didn't have enough information or expertise to make the judgment.
Absolutely, we are totally unprepared to read. Okay, it wasn't in our zero competencies, zero expertise, zero expertise in this field. And I need to complete this. What the council is doing is analyzing contents. We are competent in content. What people are saying, what people are communicating, the content of communication. Here, I would like to quote Peter Pomerantsev. It's an Ukrainian living in the state, yes, and he said that content, to try to fight the content is a mistake. The distribution is the topic. The volume of the distribution was what really produced the distortion of the votes.
We'll come back to this. Ovidiu.
Well, I would follow up on what Mircea said, and I understand the debate on the decision itself. But as an inhabitant of this territory, I hope you notice that I'm scared to use state and citizen. You have to understand that we basically have absolutely no power in the institutions, no institutional power whatsoever. Starting with the judiciary, which is the backbone in every normal democratic 21st century country, right? State, whatever. We don't have that. And after this,
By we, you mean the media?
no, I mean we the Romanians, we the citizens, okay? I said it. So we don't have any power in the institutions in Romania. So don't ask for the prosecutors to, I don't know, to be smart and to be fast and to put something on the table in order to, I don't know, spread the fog. It won't happen. It's been like this for possibly 35 years or something since the revolution. We never did this. It was all ballet. We did ballet. This is what we're good at. I don't know how good I am because I'm not good at ballet. I don't understand. I don't know how to judge ballet.
Wait,
but
for this evening, yes.
well, possible. I'll try something tonight. Yeah. In the executive lounge, of course.
Swan Lake would be good.
Yeah. I'll struggle. But again, coming back, it's you have to understand this. We are not able to do that. We don't know how to do that. We don't have the competence to do that. We don't have the people to do that. We don't have the system to do that. We don't have the laws to do that. We have nothing. This should be uncharted territory. There's something that I keep saying for almost 20 years now. It's a miracle that we're in the EU. I don't know how we tricked these people. I don't know how they, eventually decided to take us. Okay, I understand the reasons behind it, but it makes no sense. And things have gone worse and worse and worse. And I think these moments we live right now are the worst possible moments in Romania when it comes to the judiciary, at least. Because if you look at the decision about Georgescu, you basically look for something from the judiciary. You need an argument coming from the judiciary. You don't need an argument from the National Audiovisual Council. You're looking for the judiciary things. You need an indictment. You won't have that.
He's now got 6 accounts.
Well, yeah, but there are, bits and pieces. We don't understand anything yet. We have something, we know that there's been some, WhatsApp messaging saying, hey, I want this car, and this car was provided to him. But we don't have anything. These people don't know how to properly investigate and how to properly...
They don't know how to communicate.
Well,
they don't know how to communicate. That's the problem with the institution.
First, they need to have something to communicate.
If you actually look around, you will find a lot of evidence. It's just, I suppose it's a complicated picture, but if you actually look, just look at this secret.
Speaking the microphone.
Yeah. I mean, if you actually look around, there is a lot of evidence, but you're looking for someone to tell you A, B, C, D. This is what happened.
These people from abroad need that. Because they don't read, whatever piece of news in whatever, website or magazine or something. They need some, institutional proof. They need institutional procedures. And we don't have that. We don't have that, and we won't in the foreseeable future because we don't have, the practice of doing this. You have to understand this. This is, unfortunately, this is the truth. I mean, they
Very short intervention after he finishes.
I want to bring in a representative of the British state, please, to put things right.
well,
Rebecca, please.
We're all clamoring to get involved. Is that working? Yes, okay. I'm not going to get involved in the argument about Georgescu. All I would say on that is that I think there has been a communication deficit in this situation, and I think that comes from the very sort of top, from a political elite, but it is not specific to this situation. I think that is pretty much the way that very senior political communication happens in Romania, and that we've seen that deficit in other areas. I would say, Nick, I don't think we actually disagree at all. I think we agree on the importance of journalism now. I think it's harder because of the context in which people are working. I think the proliferation of information, the noise and the heat, but without anything necessarily coming out of it, the decline in the print media, the rise of the echo chamber. I think it's just harder for a good investigative journalist to get a steady job and to have the platform on which to speak, which I think kind of, Mircea, I was really interested in the point that you made about power not wanting to be held to account anymore, right? And you see that played out in the White House, the decisions that are made about who actually gets in the room to ask a question. But from my perspective, the media is also the solution there. So I'm surprised there hasn't been more coverage about that from the media that's out there. So I would ask you kind of, what's your prescription as the doctor to the illness that we see about that and that relationship between power and accountability? And I'm sorry, I've got one more question.
All right.
Ovidiu, you described at the very beginning the proliferation of new media in Romania, particularly TV. 9 new stations, I think you said, which is absolutely extraordinary. The pace at which that has happened is remarkable, and for there to be that kind of shift in the way a media environment operates in such a short period of time is really something incredible. You drew the line between that and the public funding for political parties. That is, can we draw lines between the individual TV stations and the political money that comes behind it?
absolutely.
Or is it we can do that for sure,
Yeah.
rather than it coming from other sources?
It's more or less public. We don't have the contracts and we don't know who is paying who. But if you watch the particular stations, you will see who's paying. I mean, it's.
Well, can you draw the line to state money though? That's my question.
Yeah,
I think you can draw the line to
absolutely.
political interests.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There've been investigative journalism. There's been investigative journalism done to prove this, and there were people getting this money, admitting getting that money. It's absolutely. I'm sorry, Victor is not here. Well, Cristian Andrei, he's struggling to, I don't know, to transparentize and the total landscape of funneling this money. So his journalism is sort of an activism for transparentizing, I don't know how to substantivize this, the use of that money. But there have been instances where, for instance, a former prime minister, Dăncilă, has been interviewed at the back then leading audience news TV station in Romania called Romania TV. It's absolutely amazingly bad. This woman has been interviewed for 46 minutes in prime time by the guru of that news station, and it costs 80,000 euros, 45 point something minutes. I totally see that. And Victor demonstrated that, and the host admitted being paid, well, not him particularly, but the TV station being paid that amount of money. It was a contract. I mean, if you have that kind of money coming from the political party of the prime minister to interview the prime minister, what do you think you could gather from that interview? This is what I'm asking. I mean, it's something like, it was something like, well, not, I might mix cases in my brain now, but it led to a point where a journalist asked a prime minister something like, listen, Mr. Prime Minister, but what if we, the citizens, do something wrong? This is true. It was on public radio, so I made a confusion here. But this is, the outcome of spending the public money through the political parties going to the media. This is the outcome. A journalist asking the prime minister, but what do you think? Is it something that we might be doing wrong with the cities, with the people? Do you think we do something wrong?
John's next, and then Mircea, and then Adam Chasa.
I hope I answered you.
Just a couple of things. When we had a political situation in the United States with Richard Nixon and Watergate, there was one committee, which was the Senate Judiciary Committee, that led the charge against Richard Nixon. It was one, and everybody knew it was. The case was public. There were hearings, and anybody could watch. What Alison was pointing out, the parade of Romanian institutions that were commenting on the Georgescu case, you had to be an expert at the bureaucracy of the Secret Service, almost impossible who spoke with any authority, what mattered. You'd have to be an expert in how that whole system works to understand. There's no one credible institution that stepped forward. Now, to give Georgescu his due, the critique of the murky aspects of political money in journalism or journalistic parties, or you could be forgiven if you got the sense that the existing political parties really didn't want to leave their job too soon, and they'd do anything to hold on to their position. I mean, I think that's slightly exaggerated, but there's some validity to that. So most Romanians said, oh, he's criticizing the political class that's corrupt, and there's all kinds of allusions to in which way money plays a big role. Even as a journalist, when we did a number of interviews with a number of presidents around the world, we never were asked what the questions were. We were never obligated to run the transcript by the authorities, whether it be the President of the United States or even, in fact, the President of Russia or the Soviet Union. And so, but sometimes here, when you go to ask for a political interview, they interview you to wanting to know exactly what you're going to talk about. Certainly that was the case with Georgescu. So that's entirely unusual and unacceptable. So there's so many ways, whether you're talking about money, whether you're talking about the institutions that are making the accusations, whether you're talking about identifying, the sources in a way that a normal person could understand, and a public, which I said earlier, whether it be in the United States or here, that is dumbing down significantly. I mean, Georgescu disqualifies himself just because his viewpoints are so absurd. That's it. But most people don't quite catch that.
First Adam and then Mircea. First him and then Adam. Mircea, do you want to start?
Yes, I would like to address two of the topics. First of all, Ovidiu's fury about the situation, Romania's situation in general, judges, everybody's down. I would say that if you take a larger perspective about what happened in Romania, we became stars for some European countries. France, in this report I quoted, Viginium, they have a second chapter where there is an analysis how prepared is France to face such a phenomenon. We were invited in Germany for the same topic, and they were very eager to learn what tools would they have to prevent such phenomena. And it was almost not the same. I would never say that Germans are similar to Romania as a matter of institutional efficiency. But still, they did not know what was. They had this was happening before their elections, for parliamentary elections, and what calmed down a little bit their situation was an opinion poll where there was a question: how afraid, how scared are you about a possible interference in the process in the electoral process? And about 90%, 80 plus 90% of the population said that we are scared, which is a very healthy answer, because this means that they are prepared to check the data, not to go after every fake information. So that's it.
Just a quick 3-second thought. These guys were probably trying to understand what happened. There's no solution, of course, so they were not looking for a solution. They were trying to understand better what happened. So this was the case. This is what I wanted to point out.
I'm going to have to, Adam and then Mark.
If I am allowed.
Yeah, afterwards.
We have a joke about dogs and engineers. Dogs look smart, but they can't express themselves. I'm a journalist, I'm a reporter, I understand perfect English, but I don't express myself very well because I'm kind of lost at it. What I can say is 2 days after the elections, after round one, where Georgescu was number one, I conducted an interview with a specialist in fake news and digital information. In the first call, he said, I have some basic tools. I can't give you an answer right now to interfere, but give me 1 day. 1 day later, with his basic tools, he said it was the Russians. Basically, at the first glance, I thought it was the main party, Socialist Democrat Party. But no, it is the same pattern as in the Republic of Moldavia, same accounts, etc. I can't swear, but all the clues conduct us to the idea that it was the Russians who interfered. So who is telling us that the secret services can't reach the same conclusion when they have all the tools, all possible tools to reach a conclusion? I think is lying. So why the institutions do not communicate, I don't know. It is maybe hard to say, we didn't give a damn, or we have members who are, I don't know how to say, complicit. I also conducted an interview with Marius Oprea, Romanian journalist now who he is. He spoke a lot about former security. He is an authority in former security, former political
Police.
Police, yeah, exactly. And he spoke a lot about the fact that secret services still have members who are connected to Russia. It's not a secret, everybody knows. Well, if secret services do not communicate, we should wonder why, because lots of Romanians are raising this question. What if our secret services have a complicity with Russia? Not overall, of course, not at a high level, but people who are connected to Russia. Another issue I'd like to
hang on a minute. We'll come back to you, but I've got to get Adam in and then Mark. So, Adam.
Thank you. I have a question because I still don't understand, and John partly answered this question, but I would like perhaps to hear more from people in this room. What exactly was the transmission mechanism between this campaign on TikTok and number 9 globally in trending and the actual vote? Because
I looked in it and I can explain that.
Hang on.
Yeah.
What made this candidate so attractive to the Romanian population at large that he did much better than you could expect, even given his social media profile? He came first in that first round. He didn't get 15%. He didn't get 10%. From nowhere to 15%, which would already be a huge accomplishment. He came first. So obviously, my sort of guess would be, and please prove me wrong, is that there must have been something attractive in his message.
That seems to be the case. Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sure.
sorry.
No, Mark.
Okay.
I just had a couple of things. So the first is, I think we are more, we have more in common in general. Romania's problems are not They are, you know, Romania is unique. All countries are unique. Romania's problems are not unique. And just as a sort of very small example, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've had to deal with the question in different countries about, okay, will you run, you know, but surely you'll run the story before you publish, of course, you know, but that includes the German Chancellery. They also ask that. But it's not just the Romanians who do it. And I think whether you're in the United States or you're in you know, Western Europe or you're here, we're discovering the same issues, which is that our institutions running from a media with a broken business model to various other, you know, political institutions for various reasons, they're weaker than we thought. That our laws are weaker than we thought. More is based on convention. It was never tested. And I would argue that in places like Romania, this is tested hardest because we have not yet accepted, and someone who spent most of his life writing about Russia and still tries to, it's very difficult now, they believe they are at war with us. We haven't really accepted the fact that we don't want to be at war with them. But they are at war with us. And these are very clever people. And they have learned how to use tools, social media tools, and they have their control factories, etc. They are doing this stuff. It isn't rocket science, you know, we should be able to respond. And as journalists, I should know much more about how this stuff works. Our institutions should be much better prepared, but I think because we have not accepted that somebody is actively, malignantly trying to use our weaknesses, finding them, we're only discovering our weaknesses as they expose them. And I think that is really a major problem. And unfortunately, this is a moment I would just take to with what Nick said. I think journalism is much more difficult because there isn't money. And money, you know, is, you know, the root of all evil, but it's also the root of all business, the root of all, you know, you want to investigate something properly, you have to spend money, you have to go, you have to talk to the people, you need money to do it. We all understand that as journalists. And it's just a fact that, you know, you earn less wordage on a story as a freelancer today than when I was in Romania in 1990. Just a fact. From a British newspaper, you will earn less today than I earn. In real money, I mean, in non-inflation adjusted money, which is madness. It just means that you cannot really, it's very, very difficult to live and do your job properly. You're going to have to be churning stuff out. So we need to fix our different institutions. We have to find a new business model for media. It's not work. I work for Bloomberg. I work there because it doesn't rely on the media business model. And I'm very lucky because I don't have to worry about where the money comes from. But most people do. It's a real problem.
Anybody from the body of the church want to come in on this? Tends to be rather an elite conversation. So, very short question. Could you take a microphone?
What should do the public media service in that case of heavily disinformation? Because we have a law to do that public media service should do that and that.
Anybody want to come in on?
I'm formally addressed. The National Audiovisual Council only judges what media produces, not it has no right to influence the editorial policy
But
of
you have
any
a recommendation, of course.
To change the law under which you are functioning, because the law lets your leading staff to be changed after each change of political power in Romania. So the law is generating this vulnerability to political influence.
Nick.
There was a question.
Hang on. Yeah, from the lady behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to answer that question. Answer that one. I think what the public media should do is serve the public. You know, I've been very lucky all my career to work, albeit as a freelance, but for a public service media, the BBC. And I see journalism. I think even journalists working for commercial media actually should. So what I try and teach journalists is that we're all public servants, actually, and we're all trying to encourage that habit of liberty. And it might sound glib or too easy to say that, but I think that's what journalism is. We're serving the public. We're not serving the power, whether that's the power of economic interests or political.
You were saying that's true of both private and public media.
Yes, that's what I would like. Right, journalists working for a commercial media to feel even they are working to see their profession as a public service.
Lady behind, you've got another point.
Yeah, I already have the microphone. I think us as the mass media should raise awareness, especially on hybrid work, because we were a target of the hybrid work. I think we should ask the institution why they do not act accordingly, because recently I was at an event and Professor Jola, an expert in hybrid war at Oxford, he said after Crimea in 2014, he warned the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Romania about the fact that the Russian will intensify the hybrid war, and the reaction was zero. They said, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, well, we hate Russians, Romanians hate Russians, they do not fall in love with Russian, but hybrid war, it's not about loving Russia. The hybrid war is about hating European Union, about chaos, about distrusting authorities and mass media and everything. So they did nothing. On the other hand, the Baltic countries such as Lithuania asked this expert to come and join them. They developed structures to fight against hybrid war. We did not do it. So it was a Georgescu phenomenon that should raise a lot of awareness, because it's deeper, but even deeper than we think. I know a public institution who should that should be an example. I can't say the name of the institution because I gathered information from a face-to-face discussion, where they held a party. I mean a party, part of the employees, when Georgescu won the first round. But how can we hold the institution accountable when they do not answer, as Ovidiu said? When you make an inquiry on 544, our law for public information, access to public information, they laugh at you. Even CNSAS, the institution who is studying the archive of the former security, I remember I made a long inquiry, they mocked us. And nothing happens because the trial afterwards is very, very long. And us as journalists, we do not have solidarity. Mircea Barbu there, he was forced into a van by the police a few years ago, if you remember Mircea. And we were at CC, MEAI, Ministry of Internal.
Who's that?
You were. I have the article already. And we were 6 years ago or something like that.
What did I do?
It was a protest. It was a flash mob.
Oh.
You remember?
Yes,
now?
I remember.
Yeah, and we were the only mass media there to cover the story, and the only mass media who wrote about this. And it's very, very common. Things happen, and we do not gather together to cover it. Yeah, or for the authorities to do something. And
Okay.
there are lots to say, but
No, thanks. It's fine. Alison.
Yeah, just thanks for what you said. Just going back to what you said earlier, that the intelligence agencies didn't communicate. First of all, I don't think you can expect any intelligence agency in the world to come out and have a press conference. But you actually will find... What?
Some do, of course.
Well, in Romania?
Yeah.
Well, they want to. Okay, yeah. Point taken.
But
the files are actually available on the presidential website. News stories about them. It's like you're supposed to be asking these questions. You're supposed to be writing about it.
But what do they essentially say? Do they? I mean, we all see the.
Vă rog să respectați vorbitorul.
Yeah. Russia. Oh, yeah, I'll give you this one. Yeah, Russia and how it did it. So the information is out there. And coming back to what Mark said, which I think is very important, there's a certain naivety, even provincialism here. We were talking about this yesterday, that Romania didn't realize it was under attack. They didn't realize they were a target. It was like, what? No, it must be the servicii locale. They're having fights between themselves. But the West, for various Russia, for various existential reasons, does see this as the enemy, and they think long term. And I think Romania was taken off guard. And I agree with what Becky said, there is an absolute communication deficit at a high level, and that doesn't help. But as a journalist, if you actually do go around the various sources and trying to picture it, you will find the information there. It's too easy to say, oh, there's nothing, they haven't told us. But the information is there. It hasn't necessarily been communicated in an institutional way or in a way that's easy to digest, because the picture is actually still coming out. It's quite complicated, complex and subtle, I think is what it's called in, or Johannes, the former president, called it.
May I try to answer? Yeah. There was a question which is very important and passed somehow unanswered. Adam's question about how come so many people voted for some obscure messages coming to them only a few weeks before the elections moment. Again, I'm a psychologist, I'm very curious. I would like to have a systematic research on this. But we have as help, as a possible explanation, a study made by Snoop.ro, where a journalist who will be tomorrow here, Victor Ilie, he discovered that the mechanism of collecting creduli, so people prepare to believe anything, so started about 8 years ago. And he identified Russian sources of financing advertisements for all kind of stupid solutions for cancer, for health, or other. Don't ask me how can you improve your sleep during sex. I do not know that. Sorry for this. This was not fitting the atmosphere here. So sorry. So, but what they did was what a fisherman does when he goes to start fishing, and he drops in the water some bait, and those fishes prepared to eat any kind of shit are going there. This was somehow different as the strategy used by Cambridge Analytica for the Britain's. They made researches for different publics, and they addressed specific messages, profiling them for the specific publics. Here you rose your public, which was huge, because the media education in Romania is slow. So a lot of people remain vulnerable to this kind of messages. They consume them non-critically, and this is a supposition. So when they came with these messages, they found the public already there, and the connections were prepared. They used specific addresses. They were on Facebook and TikTok, and they were there prepared to eat what I said before. I won't repeat. Yeah.
Hang on a second, John.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't particularly like to be making the case for Georgescu here, but people are perplexed by his success. I think if I were the government, I'd probably get Google or somebody to try to interpret what the Russians are up to. They're a very sophisticated operation. And I don't think maybe they have the resources, but you have to understand technology. Maybe there's a confusion between likes and shares. And I mean, they make dramatic differences in terms of numbers and so-called trying to explain what the support behind him. But if I was sitting from the outside, he is making the case that the system is corrupt. Well, the political system, or what do you think the U.S. Embassy been saying for years? We have to work on corruption. We have to work with embassy after embassy, ambassador after ambassador. The second thing is Romania doesn't like war. Well, of course, Romania has a sad history with Russia and with the Soviet Union, and of course they don't like war because they're right next to it, and they're the ones that put NATO right on the front line. So the Russians aren't going to be too happy with the Romanians. Okay, that's a good point. There's affirmation of God and religion and so forth. Well, Romanians are quite religious when you get right down to it. So I'm sure that at a certain level resonates with people. And a certain kind of economic populism or patriotism, you know, we have to hold on to our water, shouldn't go to the French, and we have to hold on to our energy. That seems to make sense also. And I'm not part of this game because Georgescu is an outside player. He's an outlier. He hasn't been near power in any number of years, so far as I can tell. So to try to say that I don't know where this all comes from, I think is a bit of a misunderstanding. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that seems to make sense to the voters here. Now, how much sense it made depends on how you count it. And everybody's had a hard time trying to count his impact. I personally think if people really understood what he's about, it'd be bad news for Romania and bad news for this region. There's no question about that. But these other factors do matter.
That is a fascinating discussion, and I hope the mic will start working.
Use both.
I can, yeah. It is absolutely fascinating discussion. I would, however, my observation is that we, in the supply and demand, political supply and demand, we are so much focused and imbalance in this discussion on the supply side. And I am genuinely curious on the demand side. How much do we know and how much there is journalistic coverage of people of Romania, and particularly these electoral groups, how much there is journalism that talks about people's condition, people's needs, people's interests, people's issues, and how much we know about it or how much we do not know about it, which enables the supply side to be so efficient with these lucky guesses and technology.
Well, let me start by trying to complete Mircea's answer to Adam's question. So, Mircea, to your question, there's a mix of everything here. So your question was basically, how come Georgescu came to that 23 something? Mircea only pointed out one thing, which is from the media, and this is part of your answer. So this is from Snoop.ro. It was an investigative report done by Victor, who will be tomorrow at this table. Besides what Mircea said, also from the media, we have Hot News, an investigative report done by Hot News. I think it was somewhere in January, let's say mid-January. The Liberals contracted an agency called Fame Up. This Fame Up thing is a small advertising agency that has connections with micro-influencers, pays the micro-influencers to, I don't know, post something on TikTok about a particular thing. Like, I don't know, detergent, whatever, toothpaste, it doesn't matter. In this case, the contract was to, enrich and bring at the surface, level up two hashtags. There were something like, someone help me please, balance and verticality, hashtag balance and verticality, blah, blah, blah. The influencers did, and also president. We want a president who has balance and blah, blah, blah. And then there were some bots coming underneath those posts because they saw the headline, the hashtag, saying, hey, this is Georgescu. This is the president you're looking for. So that's how it was hijacked. It was hijacked. again, why was it hijacked? Because if I don't know, if I'm buying something and I see it hijacked, I'll stop paying. Why didn't the liberals stop paying? Because it was the public money. It was the public subsidy. And they don't care about that money because it's not their money.
I don't think they were taking TikTok very seriously. Nobody did.
Well,
and I think they were unprofessional.
They were unprofessional and stupid, but it was
And
something
they didn't
done.
communicate either. It took them ages to communicate that their campaign had been hijacked. So
Well-
everybody was saying it's the Liberals, in fact, who brought Călin Georgescu to
Well,
power.
but it was in the mix. You have to admit it was in the mix.
It was in the mess, I think.
In the mess, okay.
It was in the mess, but the message was hijacked, and they didn't communicate that. And also, they didn't have their eye on TikTok. It was quite unprofessional. Well, nobody realised how important TikTok was going to be in this election.
Well, so this was again in media, right? So it was published by Hot News. Another thing in this mix or mess, as Alison quite perfectly says, it was something like, I don't know, black money coming to the big influencers on TikTok. We have that from also the media. It was, for me, it was like, I mean, the first place I heard that was on B1 TV from one former politician turned to be journalist, Ioana Constantin. I don't know if you know the name. Because she was on TikTok every time and she saw that something's happening with an account called Bog PR, which was Bogdan Peskir. And that's the hashtag Bog PR. This person paid a lot of money through those gifts you can give. I understand that you can share gifts in TikTok. These gifts cost money, and it was about 1 million euros paid in gifts to those influencers with the concrete request to advertise for Georgescu. So again, in the media, first in the media. And another thing coming not from the media, but from the politicians themselves. We had that discussion, we listen and we don't judge. It was like a game between Ciolacu, our prime minister, and someone important in the party who admitted that he pumped Social Democrat voters to vote for Georgescu in order to decrease the chances of Simeon, which is also something true because they said, okay, afterwards they said we were joking, but it was, yeah. So they were. These things are in the mix that led to this thing. And one more thing, if I may say so, as John Florescu said earlier, so this is what the media did. And we had more or less confirmation from the institutions afterwards. So the media was in front in this game of trying to understand the Georgescu phenomena, and then the institutions followed up, which makes no sense.
Mircea.
Thank you. I understood your question from my background as a psychologist. So how come how prepared is media in general to answer the topics of interest of the general public or some parts of the public, which is probably the voters.
Yes.
Yes.
May I just be a little more specific? To what extent Romanian media cover people's story, not politicians' stories?
Speaking about what I know more is TVs. Radio are not very active in this field, and I'm sorry for the Romanian public radio is very important. But what the TVs with the major audience are doing, they are debating internal political topics of the politicians. They ignore quasi totally the existence of the problems of the real people. Sometimes when they speak about pensions, this was a topic because it was a topic rose by the politicians, but they are not. And we go back to the good times of Noam Chomsky when he used to be more a social psychologist, and he made this research on different countries, proving that media is not able to cover the people with no money, not enough money to buy the things the newspapers are advertising for. So advertising breaks the connection of the media with those people which are not finding their own problems in the media. So we leave the same problem. It's a general topic. I don't think it's only, so they go on platforms, digital platforms, and they found their possible answers. And this was what it was used in this case.
Nick Thorpe.
I don't want to underestimate the algorithm or the good evidence, that's being produced, smoke. But my friend Eugen, who runs a car company in Timișoara, told me that he voted for Georgescu because he was simply so fed up with the gang that's been in power here since 1990. All of them. Their corruption, their squabbles, the way the media just covers those squabbles. So there was, and he said he didn't vote for Georgescu on the 24th of November thinking that he was the solution, the only solution, the man who knew everything, the man who was perfect for the job. But because he was so fed up with the kind of systemic failure of Romanian democracy that he wanted something different. And this was a new guy, and so he was it didn't mean he trusted him completely in everything he was going to do. He'd be happy to vote him out again in 4 years' time, but that was his justification for voting for him now.
Where did he hear about him?
Where did he hear about Georgescu?
How did he hear about Georgescu?
I didn't ask that. It's a good question.
Because a lot of people hadn't heard of Georgescu.
Yeah, sure. But so I just wanted to throw that in as well, and sort of in answer to Adam's question, that just so many people vote for him, not just the algorithm, not just all the tricks and TikTok and so on, but also I'd like to broaden this away from Romania, because it sounds like we're all sort of dissecting poor Romanian democracy. There's a 4-part series running on Netflix at the moment called Adolescence in the United Kingdom, which shows, it's well worth watching if you haven't seen it already, if you can bear to. It's a very painful film, but it's about the systemic failure of the British education system and the complete breakdown of trust within British society, British schools. There's a very dramatic scene among many dramatic scenes when there's a police officer investigating the murder by one pupil of another pupil, and the police officer's son happens to be going to the same school. And the boy asks his dad, as he's going around interviewing pupils, trying to understand what's going on. And his son, his 15-year-old son, a classmate, from a higher class, I think 16-year-old son, of the pupil who's been murdered in this TV drama, so it's not a real documentary event, and he calls his dad into a quiet place and he said, I have to tell you something, you're just blundering around and you don't get the point that on Instagram, it turns out that some of the emojis that one of the girls in their class, the girl who got murdered, was sending to the boys, she was basically bullying the boy who ended up murdering. So there was a breakdown. We, the adults in that British society context, couldn't understand what our children were communicating with one another, how they're bullying each other, that level of communication. So I think I only mention that as an example, firstly, to get Romania a little bit off the hook, that we're not just dissecting Romania here, we're dissecting the United States, we're dissecting Britain, Germany, all our countries. There's a kind of, in this storm or flood or diarrhea of information that we're exposed to now every day through social media as well as legacy media, that we're all in trouble. There's a systemic breakdown, and people like my friend Eugen are trying to vote, and as in people in Britain, to some extent, in the Brexit vote, voted as a kind of rebellion against the systemic failure that they face.
Hang on a second, Davide. I just wanted to make one comment, which actually, to a degree, comes out of the Adam Jasser question, and that is, but also what you were saying, Nick, to get it away simply from being a Romanian problem, which we could be forgiven to think it was. And that is that the so-called far right or hard right or new right in Europe, and indeed in North America, is now growing very rapidly and is strong, including in the countries that had Nazi governments in before and during the war. And the fear now is that is becoming a dominant politics, at least in many countries, and in others, a strong politics. How far, and this is a question to you really, to you journalists, how far has the growth of, first of all, the extraordinary success of Georgescu, but also the probable, or at least the polls show the probable success of George Simeon, standing in place of Georgescu, as it were, with a program somewhat similar to his, perhaps not as extreme as some of the things he said, but still clearly on the far right, as it is commonly understood. How far is that being covered properly by the media? The media tend, as someone has said earlier this morning, tend to be liberal and leftist, and tend to regard these new forms as something almost illegitimate. But they are now quite powerful. They have won elections. They have a prime minister in Giorgia Meloni in Italy. And they have people who, like Georgescu, like Simeon, are growing suddenly, it seems, from nowhere. And it therefore seems as though the disillusionment of many, many societies in both East and West Europe, in North America, and clearly elsewhere, the disillusionment now is making people say, as again has been said, I don't know if these new guys are going to do any better, but I'm just fed up with the old ones. Some months ago, Mircea introduced me to a number of people that he knew in his town. And these were youngish men mainly, intelligent, thoughtful, and they said the same thing. They said, we're just fed up with voting for the Liberals or the Social Democrats and getting the same stuff. And that seems to have been behind the votes of many of the Trump voters. It's true in my country, in the UK, with the sudden rise of the Reform Party and everywhere else. And that seems to me to be a phenomenon which, again, to come back to what Adam was saying, is kind of somewhat inadequately covered, inadequately made into something which is genuinely important, and into inquiries into these parties, rather than simply dismissing them as horrible, new, even sometimes called fascist parties, which by and large most of them are not. The investigation of what they are doing and why they are doing still seems to me to be partial. Everybody, you want to come in?
Someone here, I don't remember exactly who, was saying more or less like, we're looking at the algorithms and blah, blah, blah. We're not looking at where the algorithms touch, land. So, okay, they are absolutely landing on this fertile soil that we're talking about, Nick and John and everyone. It's clear that we have a fertile soil for this kind of, rebellion, if I may call it like that, with the voting stamp in the hand for the moment. Hopefully, we'll stick to that and stop there. Well, my question is, and I don't know, maybe this is a question like food for thought. Isn't this created, this fertile soil, if not genuinely created, possibly fertilized by the media itself, while not doing, the thing that it's supposed to be doing? I mean, looking into public interest issues and criticizing the public power, criticizing the government, not, if people are upset, I absolutely understand that. I'm also upset. Everyone is upset. Everyone is fed up with corruption. Everyone is, we're Georgestians up to one point. Up to we're all in the same boat. We're all unhappy. The difference comes when we have to choose, because we have something and they don't. That's the absolute difference. But aren't we also guilty for the fertility of the soil where this thing lands? This is what
Deputy Ambassador, please.
Is that on? Yes. So just building on Nick's point about adolescence, which I watched with my own teenage children, and it is an intense ride, but I would encourage you all to do it. I think it tells us so much about our societies, as well as being incredible cinematography, just amazing. But the point that Nick made from that was that different demographics were understanding the world in a completely different way. And I think that that's very similar to what we had in the election of Georgescu here. We had a certain capital-based, but particularly Bucharest-based elite, all of us sort of people of a certain age and certain position in society, completely blindsided. But when you get out of that bubble, and, my colleague Anna and I, we went to Fokshan and sat down with a load of 16-year-olds. They saw it. They knew it was coming because they were seeing the world through a different lens. And I just wanted to kind of open up a little bit to all of these people in the room, because we've got a lot of young people here, a lot of people who will be viewing this from a different perspective and probably who will have seen this coming in a different way. Whether you guys have any perspectives on what, the kind of people at this end of the room should be thinking about, knowing, hearing from you in this respect?
We've got someone here.
Over here.
Thank you. I don't know if it works, but
Yeah, it is.
I was.
No, it's working.
It is?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was thinking of this from the beginning of the conversation. I kind of ruminated while you were speaking there on this thing. Building up on Nick's point as well, adolescence brings up another issue, which is kind of, to understand it, you have to acknowledge the fact that we live in this system which is patriarchal at base. And by being patriarchal, it means that more men are in positions of power than women. And when more men are in positions of power than women, it means that the messages that get those men are especially important when it comes to what they contain. And in adolescence, there's this thing called the manosphere that's involved in influencing this young boy's decision to kill his classmate, which is obviously dire, but it's not just drama, it's not just fiction, it's things that have happened, it's real cases that have happened because of this and because of men which are part of this manosphere, which basically is a community of online men that are misogynistic at first, but more recently they are misogynistic, racist, homophobic, transphobic, whatever you name it. And these men have grown to accumulate so much power in the online environment and to propagate their ideas. Now I feel like they're somewhat unstoppable. I'm especially sensitive to this because I recently wrote an article on this thing, so it's kind of fresh for me. And also, Joan, I think, mentioned in the beginning of the discussion the thing about podcasts, and that's so important, and that's a very fertile ground for disinformation and for swaying elections, actually, because I don't know if you read this Bloomberg investigation from the US, was made on a number of podcasters, 9 to be precise, which they have all interviewed Trump pre-election, and all of them have had millions and millions of views and 80% of their audience was male. And Bloomberg, the conclusions were that it probably swayed the electoral decision of these men in such a decisive way that probably it cannot be properly counted or whatever. But it was extremely important. And this is something that was imported from the US, and it happens here as well. And there's so many podcasters that interview presidential candidates as we speak, and they have no means of signaling that that is, in fact, electoral propaganda. And I'm not sure if, Mircea, you can do anything about this, because I have a feeling that it's not illegal for them to be on podcasts and not signal that they are, in fact, promoting their agenda. But I feel like somebody should do this in terms of the state institutions, because that's extremely fucked up. Sorry. But it's something that they do and have been doing in the previous campaign. And these podcasts are also raking in millions and millions of views. So that's something really, really awful that's happening. And I feel like that's something that we don't talk enough about. So,
John,
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, please.
On the question of podcasts, and what was going on in the U.S. elections, Kamala Harris actually had more money than Trump, but he was appearing on all these subterfuge, if you would, podcasts like Joe Rogan. I would make the case that Joe Rogan has a more influential voice than the New York Times at the end. He was connecting to people in swing states and swing voters that nobody really understood. If you look at the phenomena of Trump and Georgescu, there's some commonality, there's some similarities here. In effect, Donald Trump went to disgruntled Americans in the Midwest. People were having a hard time economically. He grabbed the Democratic vote from the Democrats. Remarkable. A guy from Manhattan, a billionaire from Manhattan, slipped right behind the enemy lines and won favor to win that election. And we were talking about the appeal of Georgescu here. He slipped behind sort of enemy lines. He took on the system by criticizing the corruption that everybody's talking about. Also, he looked kind of presidential, if you will. If you didn't know him and you just sort of looked at him, he looked like a sort of serious, sensible, logical, except for the videos, candidate. So the fact that that happened here successfully reminds me a little bit of what happened in the United States. So, a guy like Trump, who was convicted and so forth, managed to win over the vote through mechanisms of media, not the New York Times or CNN, but through podcasts, through similar-minded. I'm not saying you should block them. They're entitled to make their case. A candidate is making his case to be elected. And hopefully the audience is smart enough to start catching things that displease them, that they should have in the case of Georgescu, but apparently they did not. So this is what I was saying earlier is that the media market is changing so dramatically in the United States, much more so than I think anywhere in the world. And I don't think we've really captured the significance and the impact of what that means for future elections.
I should bring in Mircea Toma, but just to pick up something on what you said, John, that is that if podcasts are having much more effect than the New York Times and CNN, both liberal institutions, what that seems to mean is that the podcasts, no matter where they come from and who is speaking to them, creating them, are more influential. In other words, the right is now becoming more influential, because it's better than picking up what the dissatisfactions of the public are than the liberals. In the case of the United States, the Democrats.
Yes. When I heard about adolescence and the debate started by this topic, I felt like we will finally touch the second topic of our meeting, Tate brothers. But it seems that we still avoid them. But I'm very interested about what you are doing, trying to get answers from institutions which made surprising decisions in what meant the Tate brothers, international travelers. Okay, but going to this specific question, you consider that podcast or other videos relevant for the elections, so which means a political actor, a candidate, or a supporter appears, should bear the specifications about who's paying for this, and this is part of the campaign. It's clearly this is necessary during the electoral campaign, 1 month. During this month, I make an appeal for everybody in the room, or Romanians, to anytime they found such a thing on internet, they should send a message to the Electoral Central Bureau, not National Authority. We are not competent with anything which deals with candidates, goes to them. We had their experts from our institutions working with them to help them. I do not know what they can do with tons of reclamatia, do you say? So, and about the other topic, it's very difficult to push to try to explain a phenomenon using one term of the one variable, as we say. So when we speak about the lack of coverage of the problems of a social category, which can't discover themselves in what's happening, but they see that anti-system topics are present somewhere on internet, and they all go there. Yes, it's true, but what we face is a secondary variable, which is coming from a state enemy, pushing this phenomenon, which is normal. The anti-system attitudes are normal in all our societies. Everywhere there are some people which consider themselves very upset with what's happening at the government, in the governing. But the dimension of this phenomenon can be only explained by the interference of some secondary tool which enhances the reaction. We are in a war, not Romania. It's a hybrid war with the democratic societies in Europe and in USA, and some countries are falling one after the other because of this phenomenon. I'm not paranoid, but I consider that some countries should take measures like Lithuania trying to do, to prepare to defend themselves in an informational war. It's not yet a war with tanks, but informational war is part of the tools used by countries, and it's part of, they have rules, how can we do this war, and it's not a secret. And we are in war. This is this explains the dimensions of what's happening.
We shouldn't forget the Tate. We shouldn't forget the Tates. After all, and Chair Barbu is something of an expert on the Tates. So,
no pressure there. First of all, I think I owe Rebecca an answer on the medicine and what I do. Far from me to claim that I've got the perfect solution for this, but I can share with all of you what I think we should do and what I do on a day-to-day basis when public institutions ignore me, including in the Andrew and Tristan Tate case. I think we should do one thing, is change, or better say, amend the law. So at the moment, we just rely on good faith on public institutions to reply, and they don't. And if that doesn't, in that case, if that happens, there's no real implication. There's no legal responsibility for them. And I think we should address that and change it. To what extent, whether it's a fine, whether it's more than a fine, someone actually being reprimanded for the job, that's up for debate. Not really my decision or up to me entirely. Second, and what I do is I'm not gonna wait around for the law to be changed. I'm not gonna just publicly express my disappointment on social media, what I do, I work the system and I break the rules. So by that, I mean I build sources inside, because at the end of the day, what are these public institutions? There are people working there. And you'll be surprised that within a public institution, you will find people that are good faith, that they still think journalism is a public mission, as we talked earlier, and they trust this public act and they trust you as a journalist. I had prosecutors reaching out to me after they saw my coverage of the Andrew Tate case. I didn't reach out to them. They silently, discreetly reached out to me on different topics, saying, I saw your coverage. I think you're doing a great job. Here's what you should know. You don't know this. And that's great. And that happens a lot, not just with me, a lot of journalists. And if you're a local journalist in a small town, you build sources in the city hall, in the local police, whatever. Just work the system, break the rules. That's my medicine. Maybe not the best, ideal, but that's what I do. Should I touch on the Andrew Tate stuff for a little bit? 2 minutes? So, I mean, raise your hand if you don't know anything about the Andrew and Tristan Tate case. Okay, so I'm guessing that all of you heard what's happening. I'm sure the details are more or less familiar. It's even harder for me to keep up with the case because every morning when I open my phone, there's a new charge, there's a new investigation in the United States, UK, and whatnot. So at the moment, the brothers are investigated in Romania in 2 cases. Just a really quick sum up. In the UK, there are 2 investigations. One a financial investigation and one related to assault and rape charges. And the UK has already been approved to have them extradited from Romania after Romania finishes the investigation. That was the judge's decision. And in the United States, they have a civil case in Florida by one of the alleged victims. They sued her in a civil case for defamation, and that actually brought them, in a bit of a complicated thing I can explain over coffee, brought them a federal case that is currently opened by the New York Southern District, which is a very serious prosecutor's office. They deal with like big cases like Epstein, Guantanamo, Italian mafia. I mean, they're the real prosecutors. That's basically the gist of it. That's what's happening. About 40 victims at the moment have come forward in one way or another.
4 or 40?
40. It was about 35. And the most recent one was in the United States. I'm sure you might have seen what happened. Andrew Tate was allowed to leave Romania on judicial control. He went there and allegedly assaulted a woman who he was in a relationship apparently with, and that brought him another charge. That's what I'm covering as a journalist. I'm covering the case, but obviously covering the case, I'm also looking into the manosphere. I'm also looking into the structural changes around the Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate case. It's not just another human trafficking case. This is, I would put it, a way of seeing the world versus the state, whether that's the Romanian state, the US, UK, any jurisdiction. It's a significant proportion or a growing proportion of mostly men, but also some women, but mostly men, who view the world, or they think the world should be reflecting on their values, who at times, most of the times, oppose the state values. But this is a very interesting case because Romania is up against some very strong beliefs, values, opinions that are being pushed out there by their leaders, or the forerunners, Andrew and Tristan Tate. I'm more curious about what kind of questions you have about the case than me just blabbing about all kinds of things related to the case. So if you want to talk about the Andrew Tristan Tate case, we can do it now, I guess.
We've only got 2 minutes.
If we have 2 minutes, 2 questions, or over the coffee break, lunch break.
one thing we can do in the next session, which is about journalism in East and Central Europe, we can again come to this, because this is no longer this conversation, which is one of the most extraordinary I've been in among journalists, with quite depressing conclusions coming out of it. But we can return to this strand, which I think should be investigated further, talked about further. It would be great if others from, not just from this side of the room, but from that side of the room, came in as well with either questions or experiences they've had. But I think we've raised enough possibilities, enough problems and issues that we should investigate this further. I think for now, we've got a break for lunch. So thank you all to the panel.